Any educational activity, whether it's technology-based or not, should be designed based on informed assumptions about how people learn. For instance, lectures are based on the principle that knowledge can be transmitted from one person to another simply by one person telling that knowledge to another, a so-called transmission model of learning. That may or may not be true, but it is one theory. There are lots of educational theories that evolved over the years, as researchers try to understand and explain how people learn best and in what context, and many of those theories have been tested over time. Now we're going to talk about one theory called constructionism. It was developed here at MIT by Seymour Papert, and it encourages a kind of learning activity that is very different from the transmission model of lectures. Papert said that everything can be understood by being constructed. So this is an educational theory that posits that learning takes place best when you're constructing objects in the real world. Given that it's kind of silly to talk about constructionism, let's try something. After I explain, pause the video and try it. So, look around you. Wherever you are, in the library or at your desk or in your bed, watching your iPad, grab any 3 objects that are near you. Then, try to build something with them. Build something tall. Once you've done that, tear it down and build something else with the same objects. Okay, ready? Pause the video and do it. Okay, you're back. Great. If you really did hit pause and build something, what you just did, that was constructionism. You may not feel like you learned anything, but I bet you did. You not only literally constructed a tower, but you also constructed knowledge about the relative weights and heights of your objects, their slipperiness and stability, and how things balance on the surface you used. You may even have constructed some understanding of other ways to use these objects. So this theory of constructionism evolved from another educational theory called constructivism, which is not a coincidence since Papert himself studied with Jean Piaget, who in turn created the idea of constructivism. Constructivism is basically the idea that knowledge is created through genuine experiences, which provide context for that knowledge. When people talk about experiential learning, hands-on learning, or project-based learning, they're talking about concepts that have their roots in constructivism. So, before we dive deeply into constructionism, let's understand what constructivism is and what other theories inform that work. Welcome. Today we're here with Professor Susan Yoon, who's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. She's been working for years with educational technology, in science education, complex systems, in informal environments and formal environments. A lot of that work has explored constructivism and constructionism, and that's what she's going to be talking to us about today. Thanks for being with us.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
A lot of your work has been based on the theory of constructivism. Can you explain what constructivism is?
Sure. So constructivism is a kind of learning theory that postulates that people construct information while going about living in the world. Jean Piaget was the most famous developmental psychologist who talked about learning being an act of construction. And so it's a dynamic process that requires one to collect information, reorganize, and constantly reorganize their information in their brain. And he came up with this theory of cognitive schema. And what one does is takes in the information and creates what we call mental maps in the brain. And those mental maps grow and change over time. So if one comes to you and says, what is a family? We have a mental image or a map of what a family is in our brain, much like when you're reading a newspaper and you read the word evolution. If you've graduated high school, hopefully you have a schema about evolutionary theory. So this is prior to Piaget and others like him at the time. Prior to those researchers, the learning theory that was prevalent was behaviorism. And behaviorism posited that the brain was just like an empty slate, an empty vessel where instruction can be poured into the brain and somehow, magically, we would learn it. And of course, we know that the brain, or human cognition, is quite a bit more complex than that. And people come to any learning situation with very strong, robust conceptions about the world or phenomenon that they experience. and they sometimes come with very robust misconceptions. And understanding what that schema looks like, that mental map in the brain, is important for us as instructors to be able to pinpoint where their understanding is strong, where it's less strong, and where we can help them grow in their understanding.
So what would that look like in practice if we might compare like a behaviorist instructional approach to a constructivist instructional approach?
So typically when you walk into a behaviorist classroom, the teacher is standing in front of the classroom, writing on the board, and students have their notebooks open, possibly a textbook beside their notebook, and they're taking notes from the teacher. Now in a constructivist classroom, you might see students potentially working in small groups, picking out ideas that the teacher has provided for them or ideas that they have generated on their own, and they will go about doing some investigation on how to answer these questions. And the teacher in those environments act as a facilitator, and so the teacher will typically listen to what the students are saying and tune into where the student is, where their understanding is at that particular moment, and evaluate that and ask further questions to help them work out what they're thinking.